So in the beginning, it was merchants who engaged in finance, because merchants needed money in order to facilitate trade. Okay? And some merchants became extremely wealthy. And when they became very wealthy, they started banks in order to support trade and other merchants. Okay, so these banks traded in gold because that was the primary source and supply of money back then. Okay, so what happened is you would come and you would put your money, your gold, in the bank for safekeeping. And the bank would give you a contract, right? A contract is just saying, thank you for giving me your gold. I promise to give back your gold at any time.
If you have gold in the old days, somebody could just whack your head and steal it from you while you're sleeping. So that's why people are like, oh my gosh, let's put it in the bank. We can put it in this fortified chamber and then keep it safe. And then they write a receipt or a contract that the gold is yours and you get to get it whenever you want.
And this would allow for better and easier trade. Because now I can take this contract and I can go to England, okay? Maybe I'm based in Italy. But now I can go to England and say, listen, I need to buy cotton or bananas from you. And the person is like, well, what are you gonna give me? I'm gonna give you gold, right? So I take the receipt and I give it to you, right? And why do we do this? Because it's a lot easier than giving gold to other people. And so this system would facilitate trade throughout the world. Doesn't make sense. Now, I'm the bank. I have all this gold. And I want to make money with it. So I want to give it to other people. So other merchants would come to me and say, listen, I need gold. Can you lend me out gold? Right? But I say to him, yeah, but if I give you out the gold, you have a security issue. It's inconvenient for you. So why don't I give you a receipt, a contract instead? Does that make sense? Because all I need is a contract, all I need is a receipt in order to go and do trade elsewhere. I've doubled the gold in my bank, right? I've created money out of nothing. So the gold is still 5 million. That hasn't changed, but the receipt is now 5 million plus 5 million. So theoretically, I now have 10 million in the bank. All right? So that's how money and finance works.
You are keeping the gold to somebody else. You give them a receipt saying, hey, we got your gold, everything's going to be good. But then somebody else asks you, hey, can we borrow this gold? And you're like, yeah. Here's a piece of paper saying that you just bought the gold. So initially, you have 5 million of gold that somebody lent you. But then somebody's like, hey, can I borrow $5 million of gold? And you're like, yeah. So then he's saying, theoretically, there's $10 million of gold, even though that's not the case in reality. Finance is weird.
Now, there's a problem with this system. What's the problem with the system? Okay, that's a good question, okay? Why is it that people believe in me? Okay, the answer is very simple. The answer is because for most of human history, people didn't need money. If you were just a normal person, what were you doing? Were you in a village growing crops? If you wanted to like get new stuff, what would you do? You would trade with someone else, right? Maybe you have a gold that I want. Well, then I would trade you a cow for it. So we didn't actually need money. So for most of human history, no one had any need for money. It was only in certain circumstances that you would want money.
This is a key insight. The trust in banks worked because for most people, money wasn't for daily life. It was for social contracts, while merchants used it for trade within their own trusted circles.
So for example, marriage, right? Okay? So throughout most of human history, money represented debt that could never be repaid. So for example, a very common thing is, maybe you and I fight, and I kill you. Well, in theory, your family should not come and kill me. But obviously that would create a lot of problems, right? So the way to settle the dispute is I would give your family money. Because money was symbolically meant to say, I'm sorry I killed you. This is a debt that can never be repaid. There was no actually real use for money. It was symbolic.
In the old days, people were self-sustainable. They had gardens, had livestock. They had skills because they had to work the land and know how to create things like carpentry, like wood products. You know how to make a bed. You know how to install a light fixture. Like they know plumbing. They know electrical. They know maybe HVAC. I don't know. But people back then were a lot more resourceful, and now we become dependent upon big corporations to give us the goods that we desire, and then we have to work for these corporations to earn money. So then we exchange the money for the things that we want because we're not self-reliant. We're dependent upon big corporation, big government. That's not good. That means I'm vulnerable. It's not good.
But with the rise of trade and with merchants, they needed money in order to facilitate the trade. But these merchants all knew each other, so they trusted each other anyway. So money was a mechanism for them to trade easier, okay? Does that make sense? All right? Okay, so let's go back to the question. This system looks great. I can print money out of nothing, but there's a problem with this system. What is the problem? Okay, counterfeiting. But at this point in history, forgery is actually not a big issue. There's actually a bigger issue. The problem is that if everyone wants to go at the same time, I go bankrupt, right? Because I lose my reputation. The contract says that at any time you want the gold, I must give it to you. But if I have if there's $100 million in gold contracts, but I only have $10 million in gold, only if 15 million wants the gold back, then I'm screwed. And this is what we call a bank run. Okay, a bank run. And this is a huge problem for merchants. Okay? There's also another problem with the system. And the problem is this. Who do I usually lend my money to? The kings and noble people. And what do they do all the time? Why do they need money? To fight wars. Okay? That's why there's a demand for gold. Because if I'm a king, I need to fight a war, usually against my brother or someone else to control this territory. Right? Now, the problem with this is I could get killed, in which case, oops. But also, what's much more common is the king would be like, screw you, bank. I don't need to pay you back. Okay? So there's actually a lot of risks with this system. So over time, develop a system to mitigate or reduce this risk. Okay? What would they do? What they would do is they would create cartels. Cartels are just partnerships. So maybe this bank works with another bank, works with another bank throughout Europe. And the way they establish these cartels is usually through intermarriage, right? They would marry each other, they would combine together. And that way, let's say 15 million of receipts wants back the gold, but there's only 10 million. Well, guess what? You just go to another bank. Okay? And let's just say a king decides, I'm not going to pay you back, bank. Well, your bank works with other banks to establish a new enemy to kill the king to get the money back. You understand? And this system is what we call today central banking.
The professor is making a massive connection here. He's arguing that these early banker cartels, created to manage risk and enforce debts against powerful entities like kings, were the direct blueprint for modern central banking.
Central banking controls the world today. Now, what's really important about this system is that it's based on power. Right? And what power is, it can turn nothing, money, the contract, into everything. Okay? That's what money is. Okay.
Nowadays, without money, you can't do anything. So besides those that own farms and have skills, everybody else, they're dependent upon somebody outside of them to give them medical care, to give them education, to give them food.
So we live in a world in which banks can print out money, right? So now let's ask ourselves a question. Wait a minute here. If the banks can print as much money as possible, why do we have poverty?
This is the central question of the lecture. If money is just a social construct, why does real-world poverty exist?
Because we can just give money to poor people and they wouldn't be poor anymore.
The next part of this video, he keeps asking his classroom, why do we have poverty? And then they keep saying it's because money is tied to resources and resources are scarce. It's like supply and demand and all that, and there's not enough money to go around. But he says that money is unlimited. Whoever produces money, like the governments, they have unlimited money, unlimited resources. Like how much food are they throwing away nowadays? How many workers do they have to work the hospitals? Like again, there's a shortage sometimes, but that's because the hospitals themselves are based in profit. So then they fire employees unnecessarily, and then they artificially create scarcity. There is no scarcity of resources. There's no scarcity of money. So then the people in power, they're not giving as much money as they could to the people because they want them to be servants. Moving on. So they raised the wage, the minimum wage in California. And then, okay, yes, there were job cuts. Why? Well, some businesses that are smaller businesses, they couldn't afford to pay their workers more because these small business owners, they're the small fish. Small fish get fried. And then the big corporations, they can afford to pay people more because they can take the hit. And then this increases their long-term stability because there's less competition, and then become a monopoly because they can afford to pay whatever wages the government requires. It needs to be more thoughtful. You can't just be like, oh, let's just raise the minimum wage because it's not simple because the small business owners are just going to go out of business. You have to be more specific. The government is raising the minimum wage, so that means companies need to pay employees more, but then the government should give the small business owners more subsidies or more funds to enable this. In the United States, 60 to 70% of the nation's wealth is owned by the top 10% of households. I've watched other video and it was saying the Gini coefficient, which is describing wealth inequality, is saying that more wealth inequality leads to a more violent society. And then there's a whole bunch of poor people that are jealous. And then it just creates conflict because people aren't buying into the system anymore and they're getting frustrated and whatnot. Envy. So it's called Nvidia, which is funny because that's almost the same name as a company that makes semiconductor stuff. So a couple standing in their doorway cast envious looks at a rich man with a hawk on his wrist and a servant to carry his heavy load for him, while their daughter flirts with a man sitting outside her window with her eye on the well-filled purse at his waist. The dogs illustrate the Flemish saying, two dogs and only one bone, no agreement. So whenever there's not enough resources to go around, then people start fighting over the limited resources. So this couple, they're kind of poor, and then they're jealous at this wealthy merchant, and then the wealthy merchant is making his poor servant carry a heavy load that's hard to carry, and then their daughter, because of the difficult life circumstances, she's like flirting with somebody that she's not even into, but she's flirting with him because he has resources which will give her the quality of life that she desires, which is like comfort and security and all that. There's not genuine intimacy or romance at all. Then we can look at greed. So it's called avaricia. So the example is a crooked judge pretends to listen sympathetically to the case presented by one party to a lawsuit while slyly accepting a bribe from the other party. As we can see, he's like, oh, I'm so compassionate and sympathetic to your hardship, this conflict over here, I totally understand. We're gonna make it all better. This is what politicians do. They give lip service to the people that are frustrated. They give them their ear, but inwardly their disposition is apathetic. They're just taking a money bag from whoever pays more. What is AI? It's artificial intelligence. We have machines that are phasing out white collar jobs. So in the past, people would chop down trees, do manual labor for a lot of things, but then we create machines that could build cars. So then these blue collar workers, they got sent home and then they had to go get a different new job or just be a poor bum on the street. So people in these leadership positions are like, hey, you should just get smarter and retrain. And they're like, oh, that sounds like a skill issue, bro. That's the meme. But nowadays, AI, it's really good at office and admin. It's good at management, business, finance, computer, math, architecture, legal, like even it's going after law jobs. And then art and media, it's like creating really good music, beautiful pictures and whatnot. This is threatening the jobs of people that were pretty wealthy previously. So this causing some anxiety within the the workforce, right? They could be out of a job in the next 10 years because this new technology now says like, oh, human labor for this like these smart people jobs is not necessary because we have a computer that can do it. Erica, it's profits, right? Profit, profit, profit. The shareholder wealth and all this.